Can anyone in the room tell me where we got nonprofits from? Anybody? Oh, Lil? Like, in America, where did we first see nonprofits? That's almost absolutely correct. So the majority of nonprofits started off as either like small groups of voluntary individuals that were like-minded and wanted to do some form of good. So Red Cross, things like that, churches, etc. and so forth. All right. So real quick, I'd like to go ahead and introduce everyone to my good friend John Curtis. Big head on the screen. So John Curtis is well, first of all, he's a Marine veteran, which I thought was really cool. We had that in common, which really helped us kick it off the bat. But he is the founder and a fundraising specialist consultant at Integrated Organizational Development. Their big spiel is basically taking little bitty baby nonprofits and fostering them into these giant self-sustaining companies. And yeah, he's been doing it for a little over 30 years, which is longer than I've been alive. So he really knows his stuff. He was sharp as a tack. Yeah, so like I said, he teaches fundraising to nonprofits, and the idea is to change their management styles to make them self-sustaining. Next slide, please. All right, so like we were talking about right at the beginning, and this is going to be on the not so colorful piece of paper that I handed you. And just to touch on like the first point is where we were saying that religious groups and voluntary organizations were our first nonprofits. And then if we look at what happened today, or what's happening today, next slide, we can see that they've grown into this $427.71 billion industry, which is insane, going from a group of people that had no money at all, or just out there trying to do good. I've got 2 points here for the scope of it. Guilford County alone has over 700 nonprofits, which equates to about roughly $10 billion worth of business. It's pretty big for how small it is. Nonprofits are responsible, as of 2015, for about 2% of the national GDP, which again doesn't sound like a lot, but when you actually look at the numbers, it's kind of ridiculous. On the handout that I gave you, we've got where the money comes from. About 7% or so comes from like government funding, and around 68 comes from the individuals in society. And then we can see where that money turns around and goes back into our communities, with almost 30% of it being based into religious groups. Next is like education, human services, so on and so forth. Next slide. So during my interview with John, I asked him for examples of nonprofits that had gone through adverse challenges, or anyone that had to like adapt their methodologies to fit their needs and business parameters. The first one he gave me, I loved it. It's this Second Harvest Food Bank. They're based out of Orlando, Florida. What they did is they partnered with Disney, and what Disney did is they donated a warehouse to them, and they painted it up all fancy. It looks like this really cool like Disney theme, kind of like almost just like a grocery store. And then they decided as a whole that they wanted to offer their patrons healthy food options. So they went out with Disney and started like going with like clean and fresh produce, clean and fresh like meats and stuff. And they realized that they had an issue. They were giving out all this like really fancy food that people didn't know how to cook. So they started teaching, giving cooking lessons for all these healthy food options they were offering. Then they took it the next step, and they partnered with local colleges where they would allow their culinary students to come over and then they would teach to these people, so they're getting all kinds of weird world experience. And then they took it the next step forward, opened it to the public, and provided a full restaurant service. The next one I have is Community Housing Coalition, and their big deal was taking the Goodwill model and basically applying that to people that are looking to like do their own forms of home improvement and such. So basically people donate to them and they resell hardware and whatnot. Yeah, so we've covered a brief history, the economic standing, and examples of nonprofits today. Any questions?